The Paramount Studios backlot was alive with celebration on the night of October 18th, 1958. The rap party for Some Like It Hot was in full swing, and Hollywood's elite had turned out in force. Champagne flowed freely. Laughter echoed off the soundstage walls, and the air buzzed with the kind of electric energy that only comes when cinema's biggest stars gather in one place. Marilyn Monroe stood near the bar, radiant in a white silk dress that seemed to glow under the studio lights. She'd just completed one of the most demanding roles of her career, and despite the exhaustion in her eyes, she smiled graciously at well-wishers. But anyone who really knew Marilyn could see the fragility beneath the glamour. Hollywood in 1958 was a brutal place for women, especially for someone like Marilyn, who was simultaneously worshipped and exploited. Across the room, Dean Martin watched her with the protective instinct of an older brother. Dean had known Marilyn for years, had seen how the industry chewed her up, how producers and executives treated her like property rather than the brilliant actress she was. He'd made it his business to look out for her when he could, to be one of the few men in Hollywood who treated her with genuine respect. At a corner table sat a man who embodied everything dark about Hollywood's golden age. Anthony Marchetti, known in certain circles as Tony the Fist, was a producer with connections that ran deep into the underworld. He wasn't Italian by blood despite the name he'd adopted. He was a Brooklyn hustler who clawed his way into Hollywood by serving as a bridge between the studios and organized crime. The mob needed legitimate businesses to launder money, and Hollywood needed financing. Tony Marchetti made those marriages happen. Tony was in his late 40s, thick-bodied and overdressed, with slick-back hair and a smile that looked like it had been practiced in front of a mirror. He wore his power like armor, 3 gold rings on his fingers, a diamond pinky ring that caught the light, a watch that cost more than most people made in a year. He produced a string of B-movies that somehow always turned a profit, films with budgets that mysteriously inflated, and returns that got laundered through complex accounting. But Tony's real power came from his connections. He was tight with Mickey Cohen's organization, had ties to Chicago outfit, knew people who knew people. In Hollywood, that made him dangerous. It made him someone you didn't cross. It made him someone who believed he could do whatever he wanted to whomever he wanted. Tony had been drinking heavily all night, getting louder, more aggressive. His eyes kept drifting to Marilyn, and not with the admiration of a fan, with something uglier. Possession, entitlement, the look of a man who thought that, because he had power, he had rights. Dean had been watching Tony, too. He'd heard stories about him, about how he treated actresses on his films, about the private auditions, and the careers he destroyed when women refused him. Dean had never worked with Marchetti and never would. Some money wasn't worth touching. The party had been going for 2 hours when Tony Marchetti decided to make his move. He pushed back from his table, his entourage of yes-men and hangers-on watching as their boss stood up. He straightened his jacket, checked his reflection in a nearby mirror, and walked toward Marilyn with the confidence of a man who'd never been told no in his life. Dean saw it happening. He started moving too, but the crowd was thick. People kept stopping him to say hello, to congratulate him on his latest film. He was still 20 feet away when Tony reached Marilyn. "Marilyn," Tony said, his voice too loud, too familiar. "We need to talk about a project I'm developing." Marilyn turned, and her smile flickered when she saw who it was. She knew Tony Marchetti's reputation. Every woman in Hollywood did. "Mr. Marchetti," she said politely but coolly, "this is a party. Perhaps we could discuss business another time." "I don't think you understand," Tony said, moving closer, invading her space. "This is an opportunity. A real role, not the dumb blonde stuff. I'm talking about making you a serious actress." It was an old line, one that had been used on Marilyn 1,000 times. The promise of respectability, of being taken seriously, dangled like bait to get her alone, to get her vulnerable. "I appreciate that," Marilyn said, taking a step back. "But I have representation. Please contact my agent." Tony's smile hardened. His hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. "Don't play hard to get with me, sweetheart. You know how this works. You want the good roles. You play nice with the people who can give them to you." Marilyn tried to pull her wrist free. Let go of me. Or what? Tony said, pulling her closer. His breath reeked of whiskey. You think you're some kind of princess? You think you're too good for me? I've made bigger stars than you, and I've broken them just as easy. The conversation around them was starting to die down. People were noticing. The room was beginning to hold its breath. I said, let go, Marilyn repeated, her voice stronger now, carrying across the room. That's when Tony Marchetti made the mistake that would destroy his life. He raised his free hand and slapped Marilyn Monroe across the face. Hard. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the suddenly silent sound stage. Marilyn stumbled backward, her hand going to her cheek, her eyes wide with shock and humiliation. The room froze. 200 people stood there, witnessing a woman being struck, and for a moment, nobody moved. Because Tony Marchetti was connected, because he was dangerous, because in Hollywood in 1958, powerful men did things like this and got away with it. But Tony had made one critical error. He'd done it in front of Dean Martin. Dean had been 15 feet away when the slap happened. He'd seen Tony grab Marilyn, had been pushing to the crowd to intervene. But when Tony's hand connected with Marilyn's face, something changed in Dean. The easygoing crooner, the laid-back comedian, the man famous for his relaxed charm, disappeared. What replaced him was something harder, colder, and infinitely more dangerous. Dean closed the distance in 3 strides. His fist connected with Tony Marchetti's jaw with the force of a sledgehammer. Tony went down hard, crashing into a table, sending champagne bottles and glasses flying. He hit the floor on his back, blood already flowing from his split lip. 15 seconds had passed since the slap. Tony's entourage started to move, but Dean turned to face them, and something in his eyes stopped him cold. Anybody else? Dean asked quietly. Nobody moved. Dean turned back to Tony, who was trying to get up, his hand to his mouth, staring at the blood on his fingers in disbelief. Nobody had ever hit Tony Marchetti before. Nobody dared. Stay down, Dean said, his voice carrying every corner of the room. You get up, I put you down again, and I won't use my fist next time. Tony looked up at him, rage and shock warring on his face. Do you know who I am? Do you know who I'm connected to? Yeah, I know exactly who you are. Dean said, you're Anthony Marchetti. You produce garbage movies. You launder money for the mob. You abuse women. And apparently, you're stupid enough to think that means you can put your hands on Marilyn Monroe. 30 seconds had passed since the slap. Dean looked around the room, making eye contact with everyone watching. Everybody here saw what happened. This man grabbed Marilyn. She told him to let go. She told him no. And he hit her in front of all of you. And I want everyone to remember that. I want everyone to remember that Tony Marchetti hits women when they reject him. You're a dead man, Tony said from the floor, his voice shaking with rage. You don't know what you've started. I'll have you. You'll have me what? Dean interrupted. Killed? Go ahead and try, Tony. Make those calls. Reach out to your friends in Chicago, in New York, in L.A. But here's what you don't understand. Every call you make, I'm going to make 10. And my calls go to people you can't touch. Studio heads, financiers, journalists, politicians. And I'm going to tell them all the same thing. Tony Marchetti hits women. Tony Marchetti is a coward who uses mob connections to terrorize people. Tony Marchetti is bad for business. 60 seconds had passed since the slap. Dean walked over to Marilyn, who was still standing there, her hand on her cheek, tears streaming down her face. But they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, of finally having someone stand up for her. You okay, sweetheart? Dean asked gently. Marilyn nodded, unable to speak. Dean turned back to Tony, who had managed to get to his knees. Here's what's going to happen, Tony. You're going to get up. You're going to walk out of this party. You're going to go home. And tomorrow morning, you're going to wake up and discover that your life as you knew it is over. Because I'm going to make it my personal mission to destroy everything you've built. Every deal you have, every connection, every doll you think is safe, I'm going to take it all away from you. And when you're broken, when you have nothing left, When you come begging me to stop, I'm going to remind you of this moment. I'm going to remind you of what you did to Marilyn. And then I'm going to keep going until you don't exist anymore. 90 seconds had passed since the slap. Tony Marchetti stared at Dean Martin, and for the first time in his adult life, he felt real fear, because Dean wasn't bluffing. Dean wasn't making empty threats. Dean was making a promise. "You can't do this," Tony said, but his voice had lost its power. "Watch me," Dean said simply. Tony got to his feet, his entourage gathering around him like nervous sheep. He looked around the room, searching for allies, for someone who would back him up. But everyone was looking away. Nobody wanted to be associated with a man who hit Marilyn Monroe. Nobody wanted to stand with someone Dean Martin had declared war on. Tony left, blood still dripping from his lip, his power already starting to crack. The party was over. People were already leaving, already on their phones, already spreading the story. Dean helped Marilyn to a chair, got her some water, sat with her while she composed herself. "Dean," she said softly, "you didn't have to do that. He's dangerous." "I know," Dean said, "but you're Marilyn Monroe. You're not just some actress. You're not just a pretty face. You're a human being who deserves to be treated with respect. And I'll be damned if I'm going to stand by and watch some connected thug treat you like property." Marilyn took his hand. "What if he really does come after you?" Dean smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Then he comes after me. But Marilyn, I promise you this. Before he gets to me, I'm going to make sure he loses everything. By the time I'm done with Tony Marchetti, he's going to wish he'd never heard your name." The war had begun. The next morning, Dean Martin sat in his study, a cup of coffee growing cold on his desk, a leather-bound address book open in front of him. He'd been making calls since 6 a.m. The first call had gone to Jack Warner at Warner Brothers, the second to Daryl Zanuck at 20th Century Fox, the third to Dorshari at MGM, then Louis B. Mayer, Sam Goldwyn, Harry Cohn at Columbia. The message was always the same, delivered in Dean's calm, reasonable voice. Tony Marchetti hit Marilyn Monroe at the Some Like It Hot rap party. 200 witnesses. He grabbed her. She said no. He slapped her. "Just thought you should know, in case you're thinking about doing business with him." Then the follow-up. "I'm sure you've heard the stories about his other behavior, the actresses he's hurt, the productions he's sabotaged when he doesn't get what he wants. Bad for the industry, bad for business, bad PR if his mob connections ever become public. Just something to think about." Every studio head listened, because Dean Martin wasn't asking for favors. He was providing information, and the information was damning. By noon, Tony Marchetti's phone was ringing. His financiers wanted meetings. His distributors were asking questions. The 3 projects he had in development at different studios were suddenly under review. Tony thought it was a coincidence. He thought Dean was all talk, that the threat had been just anger in the moment. Tony Marchetti had weathered scandals before. He'd made problems disappear. He had protection. But Dean was just getting started. Week 2, Dean made a different set of calls. These went to journalists he knew, trusted reporters who owed him favors or who simply respected him. Hedda Hopper, Luella Parsons, the editors of Variety and The Hollywood Reporter. He didn't ask them to write stories. He just made sure they knew the truth about Tony Marchetti. About the slap? Yes, but also about everything else. The casting couch abuses, the financial irregularities, the mob connections. "I'm not asking you to print anything," Dean would say. "I'm just making sure you have the full picture of who Tony Marchetti really is. Do with it what you will." Blind items started appearing in gossip columns. Which producer with underworld connections recently assaulted a blonde bombshell at a studio party? What B-movie mogul is about to find his financing dry up after one too many incidents of inappropriate behavior? Hollywood insiders knew exactly who the items were about, and Hollywood insiders started distancing themselves from Tony Marchetti. Week 3, Dean's calls went to different numbers. These were the people Tony thought he could count on: business associates, fellow producers, directors who'd worked with him. Dean didn't threaten. He didn't demand. He simply said, "I'm sure you know what happened with Tony and Marilyn. I'm sure you have your own experiences with him. Just wanted you to know that anyone who continues to do business with him is making a choice, and choices have consequences. The message was clear. Stand with Tony Marchetti, and you stand against Dean Martin. And in Hollywood, that was a choice nobody wanted to make. Tony's 3 projects in development were officially canceled by week 4. The studios cited budget concerns and creative differences, but everyone knew the truth. Tony Marchetti had become toxic. By the end of the first month, Tony had lost an estimated $3 million in potential revenue. Deals that had been handshake agreements suddenly fell through. Financing that had been promised evaporated. Partners who'd been eager to work with him stopped returning his calls. Tony still thought he could weather it. He still had his mob connections. He still had friends in Chicago and New York who didn't care about Hollywood politics. He called in favors, asked for help, tried to use the same muscle that had made him powerful in the first place. But Dean had anticipated that, because Dean's next calls were the people even the mob had to respect. Month 2 began with Dean reaching out to federal contacts. He didn't have to look hard. The FBI had been building cases against organized crime for years, and they were always interested in money laundering operations. Dean didn't provide evidence. He wasn't a snitch. He simply made sure the right people knew that Tony Marchetti's film productions might be worth investigating, that the financial structures might reveal interesting connections. Word got back to Chicago. Word got back to New York. And the message from the bosses to Tony was clear. You're bringing heat. Back off. Disappear for a while. Stop making noise. Tony tried to explain that he wasn't the one making noise, that Dean Martin was waging a personal vendetta. But the bosses didn't care. They cared about business. And Tony Marchetti was becoming bad for business. Simultaneously, Dean was working another angle. He started funding defense funds for actresses who'd file complaints against producers. He quietly paid for lawyers for investigations, for women come forward with their stories. And inevitably, Tony Marchetti's name kept coming up. 3 actresses came forward with allegations of sexual harassment on Tony's productions. 2 more talked about coercion and assault. The whisper network among Hollywood women had always known Tony Marchetti was dangerous. Dean gave them the resources and protection to say it out loud. By the end of month 2, Tony Marchetti was persona non grata in Hollywood. No studio would take his calls. His production company's office lease wasn't renewed. His staff quit, finding jobs elsewhere, distancing themselves from the sinking ship. The restaurants where he'd been treated like royalty suddenly couldn't find him a table. But the worst was yet to come. Month 3, Dean made his final series of calls. These were the mob itself, but not to threaten or challenge. Dean had his own connections, relationships built over years of performing in Vegas, of knowing people, of being respected not for violence but for integrity. He called people who understood business, who understood that reputation mattered. Tony Marchetti is done in Hollywood, Dean explained calmly. He's brought federal attention to your operations. He's created a PR nightmare. And he did it all because he couldn't keep his hands to himself, because he had to slap Marilyn Monroe in front of 200 witnesses. He's impulsive. He's reckless. He's a liability. Dean didn't ask for Tony to be hurt. He didn't need to. He simply made it clear that Tony Marchetti was a problem that needed to go away. And the mob was very good at making problems go away. The final blow came from Tony's own people. A sit-down was arranged. Tony was called to Chicago, and in a smoke-filled room in the back of a restaurant, men he considered friends and protectors delivered the message. You're out. Your financing is cut off. Your protection is gone. You're on your own. Tony tried to argue, tried to explain, tried to call in the favors he thought he'd earned. But the response was cold. You fucked up, Tony. You hit Monroe. You brought heat. Martin's made you radioactive. We can't have you around anymore. Take what money you got left and disappear. And if you ever mention our names, ever try to leverage these connections again, we'll make you disappear permanently. Tony Marchetti walked out of that meeting a broken man. Everything he'd built, everything he'd been, was gone. His bank accounts were drying up, the money laundering pipeline cut off. His connections were severed. His power was gone. By the end of month 3, Tony was living in a one-bedroom apartment in Pasadena, driving a 5-year-old Buick, unable to get a job anywhere in the entertainment industry. The man who'd slapped Marilyn Monroe in a moment of drunken arrogance had lost everything. And still, Dean Martin wasn't done. It was a Tuesday evening in late January 1959 when Tony Marchetti finally broke. He'd been sitting in his shabby apartment, the walls closing in, the silence deafening, when he made the decision that 3 months ago would have been unthinkable. He picked up the phone and called Dean Martin. Dean's assistant answered. Mr. Martin's residence. "I need to speak to Dean," Tony said, his voice hollow. "It's Tony Marchetti." There was a pause. "Please hold." Tony waited, his heart pounding, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool evening. He'd rehearsed what he would say, how he would approach this, but now that the moment was here, the words felt like ash in his mouth. "This is Dean." The voice was calm, almost pleasant, as if they were old friends catching up. "Dean, it's Tony. Tony Marchetti. I need to talk to you." "I'm listening." Tony swallowed hard. "I want to meet. Please. I need to explain. I need to make this right." "Where?" "Anywhere you want. Your office. A restaurant. Anywhere. Musso and Frank's. Tomorrow, 8 p.m. Come alone." The line went dead. The next evening, Tony Marchetti walked into Musso and Frank's grill looking like a ghost of himself. The confident swagger was gone. The expensive suits had been replaced by something off the rack. The gold rings were gone, sold to pay rent. He looked like what he was, a broken man. Dean was already there, sitting in a back booth, a martini in front of him. He looked relaxed, comfortable, like a man without a care in the world. He gestured to the seat across from him. Tony sat down, his hands shaking slightly. "You wanted to talk," Dean said. "So talk." Tony took a breath. "I'm sorry for what I did to Marilyn. For everything. I was drunk. I was stupid. I made a mistake." "You hit her," Dean said quietly. "You grabbed her. She told you no, and you hit her. That's not a mistake. That's a choice." I know, and I've paid for it." "Jesus." "Dean, I've lost everything. My business, my money, my connections. I'm broke. I'm blacklisted. I can't get work anywhere. You've destroyed me." "Good," Dean said simply. Tony's eyes widened. "Good? Dean, I'm begging you. Please, call off the dogs. Tell people it's over. Give me a chance to rebuild something. Anything. I'll leave Hollywood. I'll never work in film again. Just please stop." Dean took a sip of his martini, taking his time. "You know what the worst part is, Tony? You still don't get it. You think this is about punishment. You think I destroyed your life because you made me angry. But that's not why I did it." "Then why?" "Because men like you need to understand that there are consequences. Because for too long, people like you have treated women like property, have used your power to hurt people, and nobody stopped you. Somebody needed to draw a line. Somebody needed to show everyone else in this town that you can't do what you did and walk away." "I'm not walking away," Tony said desperately. "I've lost everything." "And you deserve to lose everything," Dean said. "But here's the thing, Tony. I'm not unreasonable. You came here to beg for mercy. So let me tell you what mercy looks like." Tony leaned forward, desperate hope in his eyes. "You're going to leave California," Dean said. "Tonight, you're going to go somewhere far away. New York, Chicago, Florida, I don't care. But you're never coming back to Hollywood. You're never working in entertainment again. You're never using mob connections to intimidate people again. You're going to get a normal job, live a normal life. And every day for the rest of your life, you're going to remember why you lost everything. That's it." Tony asked. "That's mercy?" "No," Dean said. "Mercy is that I'm not having this conversation with the federal prosecutors who are very interested in your financial dealings. Mercy is that I'm not having it with a journalist who would love to write a tell-all about your mob connections. Mercy is that I'm not having it with the 5 women who are willing to testify that you assaulted them if I ask them to press charges." Dean leaned forward. "Mercy, Tony, is that you get to walk away with your life and your freedom, because I could take those too. I could make one phone call and have you indicted. I could make another and have your former mob friends decide you're a liability that needs to be eliminated. I could destroy you so completely that you'd wish you'd never been born. Tony was crying now, tears streaming down his face. Please, please, Dean, I'll do whatever you want. Just tell me it's over. It's over, Dean said. When you're gone, pack your bags tonight. Get on a plane tomorrow. And if I ever hear that you're back in California, if I ever hear that you've hurt another woman, if I ever hear your name again in any context that isn't you living quietly somewhere far away, then everything I've held back, everything I could have done but didn't, I will unleash on you. And Tony, you haven't seen anything yet compared to what I'm capable of if you push me. Dean stood up. This is the only mercy you're going to get. Take it or leave it. He dropped a $20 bill on the table, enough to cover both drinks and then some. Then he walked away, leaving Tony Marchetti sitting alone in the booth, broken and beaten, tears streaming down his face. Tony Marchetti left Los Angeles the next day. He ended up in Cleveland, working as a middle manager at Steel Company, living in a modest house in the suburbs, driving a Ford sedan. The man who'd once produced Hollywood movies and counted mobsters as friends spent the rest of his life in quiet obscurity. He never hit another woman. He never threatened anyone. He never mentioned his Hollywood past. Because every day, he remembered Dean Martin's eyes across that table at Musso and Frank's, and he knew that mercy had been given once. It would never be given again. Back in Hollywood, Dean's protection of Marilyn became legendary. He made it known throughout the industry that anyone who mistreated her would answer to him. He got her better contracts, insisted she be treated with respect on sets, made sure she had people around her who actually cared about her well-being and not just what they could get from her. The story of what Dean did to Tony Marchetti spread through Hollywood like wildfire. Producers who've been abusing their power suddenly found themselves looking over their shoulders. Actresses who've been suffering in silence found their voices. Because Dean Martin had shown that power could be challenged, that bullies could be beaten, that someone willing to take a stand could change everything. At Marilyn's apartment one evening, months after the incident, she and Dean sat talking over coffee. You know, Marilyn said softly, nobody's ever done anything like that for me before. Protected me like that. You deserved it, Dean said simply. You deserve someone to stand up and say what Marchetti did was wrong. It cost you, Marilyn said. I know you spent money, burned bridges, made enemies. Dean shrugged. Made some friends, too. The right kind of friends. The kind who think women should be treated like human beings. Marilyn was quiet for a moment. Why did you do it? Really? Most men in Hollywood would have looked the other way, would have said it wasn't their business. Dean looked at her, and his expression was serious. Because I have a daughter, Marilyn, and I think about the world she's growing up in. I think about the men she's going to encounter, the power dynamics she's going to face. And I realize that if I want that world to be better for her, I have to make it better now. I have to be the kind of man who stands up when he sees something wrong. Because if I don't, if I just look away and tell myself it's not my problem, then I'm part of the problem. Marilyn reached across and took his hand. You're a good man, Dean Martin. One of the only good men I've met in this town. I'm just a man who tried to do the right thing, Dean said. That should be normal. That should be expected. The fact that it's not, the fact that standing up for you is considered exceptional, that's what's wrong with Hollywood. The incident changed things. Not overnight, not completely, but it changed things. Actresses started speaking up more. Studios started taking complaints more seriously, if only because they knew someone like Dean might be watching. The culture of casual abuse and exploitation that had been so normalized in Hollywood began, slowly, to shift. And whenever someone asked Dean about it, whenever journalists wanted to write profiles about the man who'd taken down a mob-connected producer, Dean always said the same thing. I just did what anyone should do. I stood up for someone who needed help. The real story isn't about me. The real story is about Marilyn Monroe and the thousands of women like her who've been mistreated by powerful men. If my actions made even a few of those women safer, then it was worth it. Years later, in 1962, when Marilyn Monroe died under circumstances that remain controversial to this day, Dean Martin stood at her funeral with tears streaming down his face. He thought about that night at Paramount, about the slap, about Tony Marchetti's face as Dean made his promises. He thought about how he'd done everything he could protect her, but in the end, Hollywood had still broken her. The industry that worshipped her had also destroyed her. And Dean wondered if he'd done enough, if he could have done more. But he also knew that for 3.5 years after that night, Marilyn had been safer. That men thought twice before mistreating her. That she had someone in her corner, someone willing to fight for her dignity. At the funeral, Dean spoke briefly. Marilyn Monroe was more than what Hollywood made her. She was brilliant. She was kind. She was talented beyond measure. And she deserved better than what this town gave her. I tried to give her that better. I tried to protect her. I wish I could have done more. He paused, composing himself. But I want everyone here to remember something. What happened to Marilyn, the way she was treated, the way powerful men felt entitled to her body, to her dignity, that can't keep happening. We have to do better. We have to be better. We have to build an industry where women are safe, where they're respected, where a man like Tony Marchetti would never have power in the first place. That's how we honor Marilyn, not with tears and tributes, but by changing the system that broke her, by standing up every single time we see someone being mistreated, by refusing to look away when it's easier to stay silent. That's the lesson. That's what matters. The legacy of that October night in 1958 lived on. The story of Dean Martin's 90-second response to Tony Marchetti's slap became Hollywood legend. But more than that, it became a blueprint. When Katharine Hepburn stood up to abusive directors, she cited Dean's example. When Sidney Poitier refused to accept racist treatment on set, he remembered what Dean had done for Sammy Davis Jr., for Marilyn, for anyone who needed defending. The entertainment industry is still far from perfect. Power is still abused. People are still mistreated. But the idea that someone will stand up, that there will be consequences, that you can't just hit a woman in front of witnesses and walk away, that idea took root that night when Dean Martin looked at Tony Marchetti and declared war. And in the end, that's the real story. Not about revenge or destruction, but about accountability. About the simple, radical idea that everyone deserves dignity, that power doesn't excuse cruelty, and that sometimes doing the right thing means being willing to lose everything to protect someone who can't protect themselves. Dean Martin taught Hollywood that lesson in 90 seconds. And it took him 3 months to make sure it was never forgotten. That's a performance worth remembering.